Iran for a long time. We almost went to war with them 6 years ago, back in 2020. And you might think, well, I know Iran's a totalitarian dictatorship. Is that what we're going to war with them? Is that what this is all about? And the answer is kind of. We've also, ourselves, have allowed them to be a totalitarian dictatorship in two different ways. One, when they used to be an imperial dictatorship, ruled by a monarch called the Shah, we supported their regime, knowing that the Shah would easily submit to whatever we demanded. And so the Shah grew more and more powerful. In 1953, the Imperial State of Iran banned communism by our demands. And after that, they began cracking down on communists all over the country, making their monarch more and more authoritarian during the age of the Cold War. And this empowered lots of different radical groups in the country, such as the communists, who were growing more and more radical, but mostly such as the anti-monarchists and the Islamicists. Who believed that their specific trait of Islam was superior to all the others, and they needed to embrace it and become an Islamicist totalitarian dictatorship. And that's exactly what happened in 1979 during the Islamic Revolution, when the Islamicists and maybe some other radical groups rose up against the Shah, killing him and exiling his son to a nearby Islamic country where he's awaited his return for many years. And you might think, well, the people had noticed the Shah was very authoritarian for some time. Why didn't they just rise up against the new authoritarian Ayatollah that ruled the country now? Because as soon as the Ayatollah was in power, we began our arch rivalry with Iran. We began sending weapons to the other nations that opposed it, like Iraq. And yes, we sent weapons to Iraq to support them in a war against Iran. That sentence sounds completely impossible, but yes, we sent weapons to Iraq. And we supported them in their war against Iran, which crippled both countries. And after that, we began supporting nations like Saudi Arabia, which has an even more heated rivalry with Iran, and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Turkmenistan, and creating kind of a barrier around Iran to prevent any of their ideology from escaping, even though, of course, other countries like Saudi Arabia and even maybe Pakistan have the exact same Islamicist ideology. But we didn't approve of the Iranians because after 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they began siding with Russia and China to try to prevent themselves from being engulfed by the American bloc. And this made our rivalry with them even more apparent. We began sending ships to the Gulf of Persia. We began putting missile sites up around them. And the more and more this rivalry heated, the people wouldn't rise up because they had one common enemy, the U.S. But when we almost went to war in 2020, after that ended, there was no common enemy for them to fight against as we turned our eyes to more internal measures. So the Iranians began finally noticing all the cover-ups that the government had done, all the horrible totalitarian things they had done, all the ideology suppressing they had done, just like the Shah, and began to think, Islamicism isn't working, communism was suppressed, monarchism didn't work. What about a transition to democracy? Never tried that before. And that's exactly what sparked the protests of late 2025 or 2026. People trying to rise up again and create a 2026 democratic revolution and make Iran a democratic country. In no way they would second the U.S., but they would be one of the more democratic countries in the Middle East and would pose a more powerful rival to Israel. But Israel didn't like that. Didn't like that idea, and America didn't love that idea either. Iran is not a good have a totalitarian dictatorship, they suppress people, and they don't have laws of free speech. But what we've done to them is very bad. And if you can think, why did we go to war with Iran? The short answer is we don't want them rising into a more stable democracy and posing a threat to other allied nations like Saudi Arabia and Israel in the Middle East. But there's also many factors in Iran that pose really well. For starters, even though this might not seem like a great justification, we don't want them to have nukes. Even though Israel already has nukes and already has the power to detonate the Middle East with 90 nukes that could blow up everything in the Middle East, we don't want Iran to have nukes because we don't want nuclear power rivaling Israel, and we don't want Israel to be able to have restrictions on their threatening and bombing of Iran. Also, Iran has lots of oil. That's always a great incentive. Back in the 1900s, the British bribed Iran into giving them 4/5 of their oil reserves. Maybe we could do the same thing. And third, it's a show of force. It's something to distract from the Epstein files and the Minnesota crisis, but really it's a show of force, showing that America as a superpower can support their weak allies in the Middle East and bomb Iran and force a regime change that brings more stability to the Middle East, even though we just go right back to the ages of the Shah, put the Shah back in power, and institute another monarchist dictatorship, and prevent them from actually rising up into being a democracy. So why are we going to war with Iran? That's why we're going to war with Iran.